Hello, everyone. This is Carol Scott with the National Ombudsman Resource Center. I want to thank you for joining our second week of new state ombudsman orientation, and we welcome all of you. Especially want to welcome Maria Green, who is a consultant with the Resource Center and has a previous life as an ombudsman and as a state unit on aging director. Louise Ryan. Louise is with the Administration for Community Living with Administration on Aging, and she is the Ombudsman Specialist. And our third speaker is Amity Overall Labe, who is the guru, special top dog, superwoman, the leader of the Ombudsman Resource Center. So I'm going to turn it over to the three of them to talk about the National Ombudsman Reporting System, NORS, and the OAAPS system, where you will begin reporting your information next year. And I will say that on the NORC website, there is a ton of information about the Ombudsman reporting system. There are multiple webinars and Q&As, and so I direct you at some point to, or ask that at some point you go and you look at that stuff. Today's purpose is to kind of just make sure you guys have an overview of the whole system and know where to go to find answers. So I'm going to turn it over to Amity. No, Louise, I don't know who's going first. Louise.
Yeah, me.
You, Amity.
Yeah. Although you did a great job introducing it, so I'm not sure how much more of an introduction I can provide. But hi, everyone. No, you're good, Carol. My name's Amity. Good to see you all. I see some new faces, so very happy to be part of orientation today. Full disclosure, I will leave in a few minutes just to grab something to eat because I really turn into a monster and it's almost 2 o'clock and I haven't eaten. So, as Carol said, this is going to be really a brief introduction and overview to NORS, the National Ombudsman Reporting System, and OAAPS, the Older Americans Act Performance System. So, you may already know some of these bits and pieces, but we wanted to make sure everyone was on the same page as we move forward. So our agenda, we're going to include a review of the NORS background, a little bit of an overview of the basics, an introduction to OAAPS, and then plenty of time for questions. So I believe everyone's muted and you can submit your questions through the chat, but Carol will tell us to change that if we need to going forward. So now I'm going to kick the ball to Louise, and she's going to provide a few comments from the ACL perspective. Thanks, Louise. Thanks, Carol.
Thank you, Amity, and welcome, everybody. Thanks for being on the call. I know if you were on the previous call, you're having a long afternoon. So just because I'm on my speakerphone, I'm hoping you can hear me. If there's any trouble, please let Carol or Amity know in the chat box. So you're coming to the Ombudsman program at an interesting time as far as data goes, because we have transitioned from one data collection, one NORS data collection to a new one. And also we're transitioning from an old software system to a new one. So you're kind of have straddled a little bit of both. But just to give a little background as to NORS and why we request the data, there's a couple of reasons. One is we need the NORS, and when we say NORS data, we're talking about the National Ombudsman Reporting System, which you'll learn more about, but which is basically it's the codes, it's the data collection. So it's not the software, but it's the cases, complaints, those pieces of data that you collect and put into your software system, and then you report to ACL. And we do use this data in a number of ways. So one being to justify the budget, both being in the executive branch, so the president's budget, but also congressional justification. We use it to inform policy, in particular at the federal level. So when there are revised regulations like with CMS, we have an opportunity to give input on those regulations, and I often look to NORS data to try to support a position that we're taking. The media often calls on ACL and has questions about facilities, issues that residents experience, those kinds of things, activities, ombudsman program activities, volunteer questions. So, you know, we use it in that way. And so not only is it required, but we make use of it. We also make use of narrative information too. And then you'll see on this slide here some examples from some of the articles that have come out over time that use, and in these articles they've used NORS data. So there's things from the Washington Post, NPR, a variety of media outlets have used the NORS data, and especially there's been attention given to the whole problem of improper eviction. And so that, that issue in particular they frequently cite NORS data, in particular the numbers of complaints about this, and that it's the most frequent complaint issue that ombudsman programs deal with. So it really helps us to have the numbers and make the case as to why, you know, why we need this data and how we use it. Okay, next slide. So just the other part of this that I'll talk about is that, again, you know, there is a requirement for state ombudsmen to report. And so, and it's both in the Older Americans Act and in the Ombudsman Program Regulation. And so it talks about in the Older Americans Act that the state agency, the state unit as the grantee, has to ensure that you as a state ombudsman report, that you collect and analyze data about the complaints and conditions of residents, and that you also submit the data not only to ACL, but that you submit a NORS report or similar report to your licensing and certification agency, to other state agencies that you might think is important to submit to, and that you also share, so if you make a report, like what I call a pretty report, that you also share that with the Ombudsman program. Now, the Older Americans Act says that you share the report with the Assistant Secretary on Aging at AOA, and the way you share that report is by submitting your report in the ACL approved tool. So it has been in the Ombudsman reporting tool. Next year, it will be in the Older Americans Act performance system. So that's, you know, that is how you submit to the Assistant Secretary. Some state ombudsmen also send us their pretty reports that have, you know, the graphics and the pictures and all that, which is great. And I appreciate, and we all appreciate getting those. Couple things I'll say also about what's in the Act is that it also talks about you as the state ombudsman, being the head of a statewide advocacy program, not only, you know, send in the numbers, but that you talk about, you write about, you analyze the successes of the program, including people who around services in residential care or board and care, and that you also in your report provide policy, regulatory, and legislative recommendations related to the problems that you've identified. So you'll see in both the current Ombudsman reporting tool, which is pretty much over with, and in the future, in the Older Americans Act performance system, you will see that there's very specific ways that you have to provide that kind of information to us about the issues, the systems advocacy you're working on, the barriers, the successes, etc. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Maria.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So I wanted to talk a little bit, Louise mentioned it, and I appreciate that, Louise, that the National Ombudsman Reporting System, which we call NORS, went through a significant change. And those changes were implemented October 1st of 2019. So those of you who are new state ombudsman may hear your representatives reference old data codes or the new data codes, and that's because that change took place October the 1st. And then also, as mentioned, we got a new tool for which to report that information into, and it's the Older Americans Act Performance System. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. And also a big change is that it allows states to be able to upload a complete file with all the details around cases and complaints. Previously, that had not been available. So all of this work was done. The previous NORS was an old, very old, outdated system, but also we are very hopeful, and we know that it's going to enhance the Administration for Community Living's ability to understand and therefore report more information about the long-term care ombudsman program, experience of the long-term care facility residents, what types of complaints were most common, and then any recommended changes in policies, research, or practices that Louise and her colleagues might want to provide to others based on the data.
And Maria, if I could just interject, we are really hopeful, especially with the new OAAPS system, that we're going to have a better understanding of the complaints and the outcomes, and also of your systems advocacy, which right now, in the way we currently get that information and with the type of technology we've been using, we haven't been able to get as good of a picture. So really hopeful for the next reporting season to see how things come out.
Yeah, it's exciting. So we're going to cover the Administration for Community Living's NORS tables. So you'll hear a reference to table 1, 2, and 3, and the breakdown is as you see it on the screen there. And we're going to go through and just do a quick high-level overview of each of those tables. But before we get to those, let's talk about the fact that all of these tables will have data elements. There'll be codes for that. Your software system may or may not have the same exact codes. The labeling of the codes, let me say that. Your software system may look different. It may have been that your vendor, subcontractor, or IT staff mapped and made those changes behind the scenes in the software. But for the vast majority of the states across the country, you are using an IT vendor, and they brought it up to this new standard. And so we really encourage you, if you haven't yet already been learning about your state software program, that you do that so that you will be able to manage the data for your program, that you can review it, do quality reviews, see that how that information can help you best manage your program. So there's the first table for table 1, case data components. And what we did was just do the screenshot of the the beginning of this table because it's long, and it's 10 pages long. So if you haven't printed it yet, just know that, because when you start the printer, it's going to be at least 10 pages and it's landscape. The basics of how to read and understand one of these tables, if you look across there with the blue screen, It will tell you the element number. You know what, I might have that. Yeah, I do. Let me go down to the next page. We'll come back to reading that label across the top, okay? So here's the highlights from table 1. It's going to be all your information about when a case was open and closed, what type of facility setting was the complaint and the resident living in, something about the complainant, the types of complaints, the perpetrator, what referral agency you may have referred it to, and a verification and a disposition on the closing of the case. Now, here's that blue label at the top of the tables that I wanted to explain a little bit. You'll see the element number here. That's coding basically for the software. Wouldn't worry a whole lot about that. The data element is the name of the data element. So for example, we might say that it's the date that the case was opened. And then there's a definition of what does that mean? What is the date the case was opened? It's a month, a day, and a year. The quantifier tells you if a single occurrence can be put in here or multiple data can be accepted. The type, whether it's numerical or narrative. And then to the far right, the examples and the reporting tips are very, very helpful. I like these columns a lot. I refer back to them. I find that you will too, and I hope you encourage your representatives to do so when you do your review and supervision or training with them, because those tips will help give them some guidance about the best coding. So here's an example, and you'll see I've highlighted or circled in green. So let's say that you've opened up a case, you're going to choose the facility setting. You can choose only one because you see that under quantifier that it's single. You would choose either the code 01 for nursing facility, 02 for residential care community, or 99 would be some other type of setting. And then below, you see all of the codes and values for the type of complainant. That's either could be the resident, could be the Ombudsman program itself, which is 03, facility staff is 04. So you see the options there. Any questions that you have about how these things should be reported, these tables are going to be your best resource to do that. So this is the second table. It's 21 pages long, and it explains all of the complaint codes and gives you the definitions for each of the NORS data elements. So you might be saying, well, how many actually are there? There's 59, which just believe me, is a lot fewer than how it used to be. So a lot of the old complaint codes were merged. But there are major categories. So there's categories A, that's about complaints about abuse, which you must select a perpetrator. Then there's categories B and through J, that's complaints against the facility. Category K are complaints against other programs and agencies. And category L is complaints against others not associated with the facility. So this is the screenshot at the top of the table of table 2 for complaint codes and definitions. And you see in the green box that I've highlighted here for you, it gives you the definition of a complaint. And the reason we keep reiterating this throughout material is your representative may say to you, I'm not sure if this was an information and assistance that I just provided or if it was actually a complaint. So it's good to go back to the definitions and look at those. Here's also the definition for the abuse, gross neglect, and exploitation. I think this slide is just showing you once again the labels. Is very similar to the layout that I just went through with you for table 1. So for consistency, it's easy to look at these tables and kind of find the different guidance for the different codes. Last but not least, Table 3, State Program Information. This one's a lot longer, so if you're going to print it, watch out, it's 35 pages long. We're going to be providing, in coming months, a lot more information about Table 3, but today we're just going to give you a quick highlight. A lot of this information that you will see is requesting that the Office of the State Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program provide narrative examples. For instance, an example of a type of complaint that you may have handled, maybe that was most common in your state. In fact, here are the highlights. So you'll be writing narratives about a complaint example, more than one of them, systems issues, that's your advocacy work. You'll be providing information about your organizational structure, numerical information, maybe about your staff and volunteers, some narrative information. There are some drop-down boxes that you can answer around conflicts of interest. There's budget information, numbers of facilities and beds, and then some things about your program activities. So in Table 3, as far as how it's reported through OAAPS, some of it is going to be narrative where you're typing. The other pieces may be manually entered or updated, uploaded as a file for that numerical information. Again, that description of showing you the layout of the table, documentation of examples and tips that you can come back to. And in a lot of our resources, especially with our data management workshop that we had recently, there's guidance around how you can use a lot of this good information. Speaking of training, let's go down to this one. So all of the trainings that we've done are recorded, and the PowerPoints with speaker notes are available on the NORC site. And so you see here, there's quite a listing of webinars that are available. I had forgotten how many we had done when I went to putting this slide together. So it's broken down by part 1, 2, 3, and 4 that you see here. We do a webinar on frequently asked questions and the responses. We did a set of open dialogue webinars where states were able to come on and ask just any questions that they had on their mind. And then the one that I mentioned a while ago, most recently, we did a data management for quality webinar and had a couple of guest speakers from Nevada. Oh, I'm blanking on the other state. Gonna get in trouble. They come to me after I passed the slide. Okay.
Was it Minnesota?
Yes, thank you, Louise. So a lot of information is available on the NORC site for NORS training. So it may have been as new state ombudsman, depending, I guess, on what time you were onboarded. Your representatives may have already been trained in the system. Hopefully they were before they started their data. But there's always new representatives coming on board, new opportunities for people to be retrained if they need a refresher. So just want to let you know that all of these materials are available. I think Sarah, the prior consultant who worked on this, and the team did an excellent job of coming up with some realistic case examples and how they were coded. There's quiz sheets and then a separate answer sheet. So that is an activity that you can do with the representatives that will kind of make it real for them. And a lot of information with you today. That kind of the good thing to remember is that you can find it on the National Ombudsman Resource Center site. And also a lot of the information is also on the Administration for Community Living site. The document on your left-hand side of the screen is the revised NORS frequently asked questions. So if you've had questions that you've had yourself or your representatives have asked, you can go to this. You can do a query, search for the answer to your question. But please know that if you don't find the question and answer you were searching for, or if you're just not sure that your question is a little bit different, you're always welcome to call the NORC Center, either myself or Amity or Carol. Any of us are available to help you answer questions. And then with our recent COVID-19 pandemic, we've had questions about certainly how do I code things now that I'm not able to do visits or in-person visits with residents. And so a lot of the answers are there about proper documentation. So several slides back, I mentioned we'd talk a little bit more about the Older Americans Act Performance System, OAAPS. And to that point. So if you look on the left-hand side, you'll see when you go to that site, this is the landing page. Right below here is your link, okay? So any of us, even the general public, can go and look at this site. You can see a lot of the recorded webinars and all the information, navigation tips without having user access. But we really encourage you and want you to have user access. So if you haven't already established access and have a password and a username to get into OAAPS, you can contact Louise. She'll help you or direct you to the right source to do so within the Administration for Community Living so that you can get your own username set up and password.
Yeah, Maria, if I could just add that it's a new process in terms of going to this new software and how you get access to it. So for many of you, I need to work to get you established within, because ACL IT have a role. So I will be getting your contact information to them, and you will be getting an email from them. So I'm hoping next week to put some time aside and get that all taken care of. You will have to sign paperwork because you are being set up as an admin user. And I want every state ombudsman to be an admin user and to go into the system and get to know it. Even if you have someone else who primarily does the work in the OAAPS, but I want you to be familiar with it as well. And in part because it's much more dependent, there's a much stronger link to your software in terms of your having to upload files, which Maria will talk more about. But you need to be really versed in your software, because the accuracy of your data is really going to be dependent on, or the accuracy of your report is going to be dependent on how accurate your data is in your software. So I'll stop talking now.
Oh.
Thanks.
Amen to everything Louise just said. Thank you. So once you're at that home page for OAAPS, you can click on resources here. You can choose Title 7, that's the Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program, and then you're going to see all of these guides listed here. There's just a few listed. There's even more on the screen. And I've gone through all of them. They're easily read, reviewed, excellent source of information. And then there's a recorded training over here on the left-hand side. They also have frequently asked questions. So I think it's a very user-friendly site. We did a highlights or a review for you. So if you want to take a look at it, it's the screenshot there is on the left-hand side. Information about what you need to know. It's available for you to scan and review on the NORC site. And the way it has been set up is that if you're having technical difficulties, first you need to check to see if it's technical difficulties with your own software. And if that's the issue, then you need to talk to your contractor, your vendor, or your state IT staff to help with that. But if it's something like you're having trouble uploading the file and it's not being accepted into OAAPS, that's something where you would call the vendor that is working with the Administration for Community Living, and the address is right there, OAAPS Help Desk at ACL. And so you'll be able to get information from them about the technical side of working within OAAPS. If you've got programmatic questions, ACL and their contractor, the Lewin Group, subcontracted with the Ombudsman Resource Center to help you with programmatic guidance and to do training like we're doing today. So if you're not sure, let's say you're trying to write in Table 3 section, you're trying to write a narrative example, and you're not really sure if you picked the right or best example, that's something you could give us a call about.
I ate my Chipotle, which was so good. You can. You're gonna eat that.
Okay, so we have some important dates we'd like for you to just on your radar.
Maria, hang on just a second. If you're not muted right now, please mute yourself. Kelly, thanks.
Nothing like being called out, right? We've all done it.
Oops, sorry.
That's okay. I just keep waiting for my dog to bark, and she's not done it yet, so I'm really proud of her. So there's some important dates for you to remember. Of course, in state government, you've probably got different dates for the beginning and ending of your state fiscal year. But for the purposes of reporting in NORS, we use the federal fiscal for 2020 that began October 1st, 2019, goes through September 30th of this year. And then when you actually upload that data and provide that information to OAAPS, it happens in January of 2021. So the last date that you should be getting it submitted is January 31st, 2021. So keep those dates on your calendar. And then we've got some upcoming training. We're going to go over more information about the Table 3 sometime in August. And then Louise is going to lead, and I'll be there with her, but we'll do a presentation on NORS and OAAPS sometime in October, which may coincide with the Consumer Voice Conference, either in person or virtually, I'm assuming.
So Maria, this is Carol.
Yes.
You know, one of the last pieces of information that normally comes in is the budget information.
Mm-hmm.
And I assume that that's what you'll probably be talking about in August, but is there some tips that you might give these new people regarding working with their budget people so that they will be at least prepared months and months ahead of time on what questions or what information they're going to need from their organization's budget?
Oh, that's good, Carol. First of all, if you haven't met your budget person, or either they're either in your Ombudsman program, or like for a lot, you're probably using support from another budget officer somewhere, make sure you go and introduce yourself to them, get to know them, so that you're not asking them on January the 30th for the information and they're saying, what's your name? So get to know them. You should be familiar with all your sources of funding for your state ombudsman program, so that when you talk with your budget director, you know the difference between elder abuse funds, ombudsman program funds, and maybe social services block grant funds. I'm just pulling that up out of the air in case that's a fund source you use. To be knowledgeable of your sources, get to know your budget director, do that sooner rather than later. And I think that that will help you probably have a more successful process in gathering your budget information to submit that. Carol, can you think of other things? You've been in the state ombudsman office before trying to figure that out.
Yeah, I didn't know that it took, that's not a number that you can walk in their office and say, give me this. I mean, for whatever reason, it takes them several weeks, and it could be because in our setup here in Missouri, we work with the area agencies. So part of the numbers they're going to provide you is expenditures at the area agency level. So you need to be asking them for this information as soon as as soon as October 1 starts. You need to say, hey, I need this. I'll check back with you mid-November. And then in mid-November, you're going to want to ask and hope that they can get it to you by December 1 or something.
Right.
So if anyone...
It is expended funds that you've got to account for, not your budgeted funds.
Right.
Yeah,
so
and I think that, oh, go ahead, Carol.
No, I was going to move on, so go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that's I think the hard part is it's not what's budgeted, but what money was spent and what pots of money were spent. So, and we're trying to wrap up fiscal 2019 right now, and there's still some states that are struggling to give this answer. And I'm kind of thinking about, we've not trained state ombudsmen on this part of NORS, so we will be. But I also thought whatever we provide in terms of training and everything, I want to share with the state unit so that they understand what the needs are. And this would be something I want to coordinate with the rest of the Older Americans Act programs, because on the state program report side, where they report their respite and their meals and all that, they have to do the same thing. They have to report funds expended. So, and also the states send the feds a bill and say, we've spent this much money. So I'm thinking there's got to be some ways to try to make this a little bit easier on everybody. So I'm just saying I'm going to try to make that commitment to see what can we do at ACL to help you and the state units. So I just think we need to really take a whole new approach to what we've been doing, because for the past 20 plus years that we've had NORS, it hasn't really worked very well. So it's like, okay, let's try something else here. So
yeah,
I was just going to say the tips that both Carol and Maria gave were really helpful, and you've got to get to know your fiscal people. And as soon as the fiscal year's over, start checking in with them, and even sending the list, like you can copy the list from an Excel spreadsheet and say, here's what it is, and send them that data so they know exactly what you need. So.
Great, thank you, Louise. And Amity just typed in, and we'll continue to remind people, but there is additional information on the landing page for orientation. There's a section about program funding. So, so if you have a question, please either type it in or unmute yourself, and we certainly have some time here for if you have any questions. And as I'm waiting for people to unmute, I will just mention that this will be the first time that the Ombudsman reporting and other program reporting at the state unit are in the same system. So Louise's thought here about financial reporting, fiscal reporting, that's very good. And there may be some other people in if you're in the state unit on aging, that are using OAAPS, even though it's separate systems within the bigger system, but there are going to be some other people, which is going to be nice, and it's not us using our own system. So, questions? If you're talking, you're muted.
Hello, this is Patty.
Hi, Patty.
Hi, I don't have a question. I was going to offer some insight that I've learned over the years from Texas about the financial reporting, and I definitely hear you, Carol, about we have local ombudsman entities, and so most of them are in AAAs, and it takes time on that part of financial reporting because it's months that they are doing what they call closeout of those fiscal year end to their contract year. And so we basically have to just report the best numbers we have. There is still, some juggling of where things are placed in what categories of funding, and it will change afterwards, but I find a cutoff time. I give them ample notice in my agency about when that is. And we try to give them about 60 days notice and then ask for it by January 1st. So that's what we have done because we're a pretty big agency and things are pretty slow around Texas. And the other thing I wanted to mention is I have found that even my state office budgeting, I have to remind the people who pull some of my numbers for me to remember things like my CMP grants and report that, and that it's really easy in reporting time year after year to forget about a special grant, whether it's CMP or some other kind of funding. And that's something to kind of make a mental note of, I think, just to put on your to-do list to think about all funding sources and not just what seems really obvious out of the Older Americans Act.
That's a very good point. And this year, everybody will be adding in their COVID funding. Yeah.
I have another one to suggest, Carol, if there's not another question yet.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so I think another challenge that's better to address sooner rather than later is that there's a lot of information asked about types of facilities, numbers of facilities in your state. You need to get to know the head of your licensure and certification agency in your state. Ask them if who on their staff can provide you that up-to-date and current information about the numbers of facilities, types of facilities. You're going to need to be able to describe the types of facilities that your representatives go into based on your state program's guidance. And I can anticipate that that also is going to be something that you're going to have to really work with, making connections, starting sooner rather than later, asking for the information. And then I would also recommend having a date certain that you're going to report those numbers of types of facilities, because as you know, that changes daily. Some close, some open, that sort of thing. So that's my other piece of advice in that category.
Good point. And I would recommend all of you mentors to sometime in the next month or 2 or 3, spend some time talking about I know this is all new for everybody, but if you've got tips, something that happened in your state, just have that conversation with your mentee. Think there's any other question? Do you to your to the next slide?
Okay. Let's see if is Amity with us. If so, she was going to describe this. If not, I can do it.
Sure, I am here and have a little food in me, so I'm not going to pass out. And there's no screaming from the children, so we are good to go. Thanks, Maria. Thanks, Louise, and thanks, Carol. And thank you, Patty, and other mentors for sharing your input. So I did put a couple links in the chat box. There has been some previous presentations I think they've all been in person, so they're just slides and not webinar recordings. I was trying to see about fiscal policy and guidance by Louise. And so if you have not looked at those yet, please do, and the link is in the chat box, so check that out. But wanted to call your attention to where we have the NORS and OAAPS information. The first link is the landing page for all of our NORS instructions, the training, the materials, everything. And then we added a new bullet on that landing page specific to state ombudsman training, because some of the state-specific information is on the private side, the login side for state ombudsman, but Louise wanted us to make the most recent webinar available to all, the data management one that we did in April. So that is there, as well as the highlights document. So for example, if you needed to refer anyone from your state unit or your supervisor and wanted to share that information with them, you have a public link too. We also have developed and will continue to develop as we receive questions about NORS, some FAQs. We have some specific to reporting activities during COVID as well, and they're on that FAQ page. And then of course we have, like I mentioned, the state ombudsman side. There's a landing page specific to NORS and OAAPS, and the links are there. And then as well, a link to the OAAPS page itself that we talked about a few slides ago. Our contact information is on this slide, as Maria talked about, and Louise even mentioned some additional training about fiscal reporting specific to new state ombudsman. We don't have that training developed yet, and I just responded in the chat to Amanda about that we need to talk to Louise to see how we would roll that out, if it would be part of regular orientation or something else, and just touch base on that. So we'll keep you posted on that. And then we will have additional training specific to ACL Table 3, as Maria mentioned, and a user guide that will be out this summer. So keep an eye on your inbox for that webinar and user guide that will be available in August. So don't hesitate to reach out to any of us. Of course, you have the Ombudsman Resource Center general email, Carol's contact information, and then us as well on the NORS and OAAP side. So please reach out. And I think that was all I had.
Okay, I just want to remind you.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to you, okay?
Okay, hang on just a second. Okay, well, never mind. Well, on that last slide, it showed we do have. Thank you. We do have a phone app. So it's, you can just go to Apple Store or Google Play and type in LTC Ombudsman Resource Center. And we would hope that you and all of your representatives would get that app. That this is the idea behind it had been when you were out in the field and somebody, I don't know, needed to know something, you would have access to documents, Old Americans Act, or whatever, I mean, policies and procedures, things that we have on the NORC site are this app. So just download it, and we would appreciate that. Oh, here, I'll just take over.
And Carol, while you're taking over, Louise added her cell phone number in the chat box as the best way to reach her. Just wanted to highlight that. I didn't include that on the slides. So
thank you. Thank you. So
yeah, it's fine to call me on that number. Yeah.
So just a reminder that our last session you had a homework assignment, and that was to send us a picture if you wanted to be included in State Ombudsman photos. Lisa, appear to be missing you, and any of you date your photo, you're welcome to. You know, this is a really way to, you know, when you're talking to someone, to just be able to see their face. On homepage, down at the very bottom of a whole. So I appreciate. I got one in, and but the rest of you I had not heard from. It may be because you were already on there. We'd already grabbed them. So what I'd like to do is, we've got about 2 minutes, and I'd like to have Jan there.
Yes.
Jan, I'd like you to introduce yourself. We'll do, we'll have a couple of people introduce themselves.
You're cutting out. I didn't hear what you asked.
I was wondering if you introduce yourself, everyone.
Yeah, well, my name is Jan Engen. I came to Montana from Alaska. I've worked in aging services for a little over 35 years. I've worked in Minnesota, North Dakota, Arizona a couple of times, and Alaska. Now I'm down in Montana. I've served with local programs for retired senior volunteer program, senior companion program in the state of North Dakota. I worked as a AAA director in Western Arizona, chief operating officer in Region 5 in Arizona, and left there for a while and came back and was in a different position. And I went into direct services when I accepted a position in Alaska with the Salvation Army, and had an opportunity to open up a brand new kitchen for the Older Alaskans program, and retired and came back to work.
Great. And you now have your own computer and your own phone and your own email address.
And soon to have my own fax number. I moved down to Montana on the plane with one suitcase and the clothes on my back. Everything I have in my little apartment, I've got a 3-bedroom apartment here, is anxiously awaiting for the border between the US and Canada to open up so I can get the rest of my belongings.
Oh my goodness.
Oh boy. Well, thank you.
I'm indoor camping with a television set. I was quarantined for 14 days. And the first day I was a little excited and nervous because my TV didn't work. And I've had them here at the house for about 3 times, and I'm hoping.
Well, we're just thrilled to have you on board.
Thank you.
So Mary, do you want to say hello and tell us a little bit about yourself, if you unmute, or not? Hello, Mary. Okay. Patty Hall.
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
I can.
Hi, how's everybody doing?
We're doing good. How are you?
I'm doing good. So back in 1986, in California, I got my LPN license, and I worked in nursing homes and assisted livings for 30 years. I worked in there as medication nurse, infection control. I did staff development for quite a while. Really enjoyed it. Came to Wyoming in 2011. Worked at the VA nursing home. I worked at an assisted living. And then I got a chance to be the regional ombudsman. Did that for 3.5 years. And my boss at the time, Lindsay Ruby, was making a transition to go to the VA. And she asked me to apply for her job. And so I got that in January. Really enjoyed it. I don't know how somebody comes into this job and doesn't know the ombudsman side of it and the other, you know, reporting and budget and contracts and that kind of thing. Because just coming into it with the regional background, it's very frustrating on the other side. So I applaud those who come into it cold turkey, so to speak. But I've enjoyed it. I'm learning lots, and I really enjoy these meetings, and I enjoy the NASOP meetings because I get to see what others are doing, and I get to hear examples, and it's very, very exciting.
Well, great. Well, welcome. And I think it's always good when someone has the opportunity to be a regional or local ombudsman, and may have always said, well, what do they do up there? You know, and yeah. now you know.
Yes.
Okay, well, we will continue with introductions next time. We'll be sending out information, and we just thank you for your attention today. We want to thank Maria, Amity, and Louise, and especially those of you that are mentors for helping guide the new folks in, you know, what is unimaginable to not be able to be around the rest of the program. So thank you all, and we'll get together next time. Have a good
and
day.
Carol,
Yes.
Mary Sherrill is still on the call, but she's having some technical problems. So I just noticed in the chat that she mentioned
thank you.
that. So I find with Zoom, well, I'm having all kinds of technical problems today. So especially with Zoom, I just decided I have to use my phone. So at least I can continue with the voice, even if I can't see. Like I've gone in and out of Zoom about 5 times. So that might be a tip for some of you. If you have any connectivity problems, to just dial in so you've got that phone back up. Just my parting thought for the day.
That's pretty special. We appreciate that. So everybody take care, and we'll continue with part 3 next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, Carol.
All.